sign it. Don't write your friend's name and sign for your friend. Just, I want to know who's here, that's all. Okay. The other thing is that if you are not registered and you are sitting in and you haven't asked me, if you haven't told me about that, please do make sure that I know that you're sitting in. So there are a couple of you. Okay. That's something that you should make sure that you get with the cheap guy. So we are going to be doing essentially the basic models of information retrieval today, the similarity matrix for information retrieval. And so we ended here, last class, more or less. Are there any questions before I move forward? No. Okay. So we essentially, if you remember, how many of you have read the Lincoln, Woody Allen sketch on Lincoln? Okay, good. So what's the connection to the class? Other than the fact that I like Woody Allen, what is the connection to the class? I did see some blog comments which seem to miss the point. So what are, does anybody want to hazard a guess as to why it's connected, other than I forced you to read it?
Maybe the label thing.
The label thing? I don't know what you mean a label thing.
Maybe I meant that Lincoln didn't know why the person asked that question, so he was stressed. The other person didn't know why he laughed, so he was stressed. But they both missed the point. I mean, they both were wrong in there.
Yeah, that's you're sort of looking at the transition period. But I want also to understand. I want you to think of what happened in the end. Basically, any other hazard guesses as to why it is connected at all? So what I would like you to think about it is you want your IR system to answer what you meant, not what you asked. Okay, most of the time that's exactly what you have in mind. So in some sense, the correct answer for how long should a man's legs be is that yes, I will let your son out of the jail. That's the correct answer. And so in some sense, I mean obviously this is a far-fetched example, but in essence, he figured out what, and that's why it's far-fetched, but he figured out what exactly you meant to ask when you asked this. And so I want you to keep that as like an extreme example of what we really expect from our IR systems. We have something in our head, we sort of provide a very weak projection of what we have in our head, and we are really mad if we don't get the right answers. Okay, and so that's the connection that I want you to think about to some extent. Okay, so we did talk, this is why in some sense, had you done information retrieval the right way, which is you learn the relevance function for the user, then perhaps over a period of time you can imagine, realizing that whenever this particular guy asks about, the length of the legs, the answer should be about letting the kid out of the jail. Yeah, what?
In real situations when that happens, we have to ask back what he really meant.
I understand, but the point is, that's why we did talk about learning actively versus passively. Okay, so for example, you did have this conversation once. So for example, I say, so in essence, you may not understand upfront, but by learning, you the information retrieval engine, by interacting with me, the user, and learning my preferences, should be able to understand later on, if I ask the same sort of a query, what should you answer? If every time you are freshly surprised, you are not a good information retrieval engine. Okay, so in some sense, doing it the right way, which is by learning the preferences, learning the user relevance function, this won't be a problem. And that's why we talked about it upfront. But then we said in the end of the class that we won't do the learning, that's too hard. Instead, what we'll do is we will impose a relevance model. We'll impose a relevance model and we'll just pre-compute it upfront. So they, rather than learn the function. So remember that there are two different kinds of issues here. One is, suppose, remember we were talking about function fitting. you're learning a relevance function given some inputs, right? So you could first of all talk about learning this function. And once I learn this function, then whenever you give me an x value, I will be able to give you the y value according to that function. That's how I predict. Okay, if this function that I learned is a complicated function, which involves, x power 7 plus 2x power 6 minus 3 x power 5, blah, blah, blah. And when you give me the x value, I need to plug those x value into this to compute the y value. But that computation is silly computation. We won't even call that a real computation. You just basically plug the value of the x to get the value of the y. Okay, what I mean by imposing a relevance model is that if you were trying to learn, given these data, then after many functions that can be drawn through these points, you will try to learn what's the best function. Okay, and then you will be plugging in the values at the query time. By imposing a structure up front, I am telling you that I would not actually try to think of it as a learning function. I just say whenever I have it, I will just pick like a line or something. That would be the function I will use. Okay, so in essence, we will figure out what the default model of the function we will just pick. Okay, and then that's the one that we'll be using. So much of what we'll be doing today is essentially how to, if you were to pick one single function, upfront before even looking at the data and trying to go through the learning, what would be reasonable functions to pick? And the similarity functions we'll talk about today would be exactly those. Okay, and you could, so that's basically what we'll be doing. So assume and impose a relevance model, and then that would be sort of could be based on the default models of V and U. So today's class starts here. Remember that we are trying to compute this function. Okay, we figured out what are the inputs to this function. These are relevant inputs that you might want to consider. And then rather than learn the function itself from the XY pairs, which in our case would be given a document corpus, here is a query, here is what the user liked as relevant examples. Here is a query, here is what the user didn't like as relevant examples. Okay, given that, you can try to learn this function. Okay, instead what we are going to do is we're going to just pick a function up front out of thin air, and that would be sort of reasonable. That would be a similarity function. Okay, now the similarity function obviously would depend on similarity between what. If I'm giving you like two sets, then you can talk about similarity between the two sets. If I give you two pieces of music, then it's a different similarity function. You need to provide a function that makes sense given the representation of the entities. Okay, so while we are talking about similarity, the big issue is how are we going to represent D, Q, U, as well as, of course, the sequence of results given to DK that have been given. Okay, and then we'll just this one is sort of giving you some ideas that you can do. So the obvious thing is, which we would not consider, is the document, and this document as well as these documents, they need to be represented somehow. Okay, how will you represent it? You can represent it by their meaning, but I don't know what the meaning is, so I'll give up on that. I can represent it by the keywords. Each document is represented by the set of keywords that are present in the document. Okay. Now remember that keywords essentially in the old library scenario, for each book somebody has to say what are the keywords for the book, and those are the words under which this book is essentially indexed. Okay, so I can then say that the entire document is really just the keyword part of the document. So that's how I represent it. Okay, I can represent the document by all the words, and we can represent the document not just by words but sentences in the document. I can represent the document not by sentences but contiguous pieces of text in the document. All of these are different ways of representing the document. The reason I want you to think about it is, we'll pick one, we'll pick all words, but you need to know what else you could have done. And much of the time when we start, leave the vector similarity and try to improve it, we would be going to shingles, and we'll be going to parse trees, we'll be going to other things. Okay, so these are some ways you could have represented the T part. Now how do you represent the Q part? The Q part, of course, you can again be representing in terms of what the user meant, meaning of the query. And so meaning of the document and meaning of the query can be compared to decide the similarity, but we don't know how to do that. Okay. The other possibility is that query Q also can be represented by keywords or just all words, shingles, etc. By the way, the word shingle is something that you may not have heard of before. A shingle is essentially, a K-shingle is a contiguous sequence of K words. Okay, so for example, if I have brown fox jumped over the fence, then a three shingle representation of this, let's say, would be dove bound fox is one shingle, brown fox jumped is another shingle, fox jumped over is another shingle, and jumped over the is another shingle, and so on. Okay? Now, a K-shingle representation is that, so normal words are one shingles.
That's synonymous with an engram?
Exactly. Good question. What's the difference? Whatever I'm doing for the files, I can also do for sequences. I can do for words. Okay? If I do this for words, so files are made up of words. So you can talk about one shingle or K shingles. So it means one shingle is one word. K shingle means K contiguous words. Now if I have a word that's made up of letters, okay, then you talk about grams. A 1 gram is basically, so if I have the letter, the word Subarao, okay, the 1 gram representation of this string. Normally, I mean, of course, people do kind of use this sometimes synonymously, but shingles normally mean for the words, and grams normally mean for the letters. Okay, so the 1 gram representation of this is S, U, B, B, all those things. Okay, and the 3 gram representation would be S, U, B, U, B, B, and B, B, A, and so on. Okay, that's the 3 gram representation. Now, what's interesting is because this question came up, you can keep in mind the following question, which as we are discussing today's class, Google also, I mean, most search engines also do spelling correction for you. So you start typing my name, and none of you know the spelling. By now you should, but you don't. And so you start typing something close to that, and it will say, do you mean this? How did that figure out? Again, it's based on, it takes your query word, compares it to the dictionary words, using some of the same techniques that we'll be discussing today. In particular, you'll do K-gram based distance. I'll have a separate lecture on that. But it's sort of isomorphic, you know, given words, giving documents that contain them are similar to that. Are given a partially formed single word, or which is a substring, giving the strings that you actually probably meant to type, which is spelling correction. Ideas are similar. Some of them work in some cases, but generally the problem is very similar. Okay. Anyway, so shingles, you can represent them as shingles also. Now the interesting question is the following thing. In fact, even at this level, before I even told you anything, suppose I represent a document by 1 shingle versus 2 shingle versus 3 shingle, where 1 shingle is nothing but words. Okay, what do you think would be the effect of it? And you present the documents and queries as 1 shingles or 2 shingles or K shingles. Okay, so suppose I have the option of doing it as 1 shingle or 15 shingle, let's say. What do you think is going to be the effect on precision and recall?
Precision will decrease if the K is high.
Precision what?
Will decrease.
Precision will decrease?
Will increase if K is high.
Make up your mind. There are only 2 things. You can't say 4. What do you really want to bet your life on?
Increase.
Increase. Precision will increase if the K is high.
And recall will decrease.
Recall will
Decrease.
decrease. Does anybody want to question him on that?
Recall will,
Precision should.
What?
recall will say the same anyway.
No, so basically he's right. Precision will increase, recall will tend to reduce. Okay? And so in fact, so basically that's because I've given a query with 3 words, okay? If you are doing a shingle-based representation, then you need to have those words appear next to each other in that order in some document before you can say that they're similar. I mean, I'm jumping ahead, but that's what you would think, right? Because for you to say the shingle is present here, there should be those 3 words in some place together in the document. Whereas if it is just one shingle, then each of these words can be present, one here, one here, one here, and you will still say the document is relevant. So in this sense, generally, you'll get to retrieve more documents if you have lower values of k for k shingles. But you tend to have higher precision if you have higher values of k. So another point, again, jumping ahead, is suppose much of what we're going to be discussing today is essentially similarity matrix. Similarity matrix, given a query and a document, how similar is the query to the document? But then we actually think of queries, remember, notice what I did here. Queries are really documents. They are represented somewhat the same way as the documents. So in fact, one of the views in IR is a query is a document too. So if you know how to compare similarity of 2 documents, then you also know how to compare similarity of a query and a document. Okay? Now, my question is, mostly in IR, you're just giving a query and you want an answer document. But some of the same techniques, the similarity detection techniques, can also be used to see whether or not you copied, if 2 of you have copied the same essay, right? That means you wrote, I gave you like a term paper, and 2 of you have basically looked at each other's stuff and more or less, copied the same thing. Okay, there too I want to know, is there like inexplicable similarity between 2 students' essays? If so, I would like to take them to the dean and the president and show them, these 2 students are real soulmates and they should just get 1 degree, right? So the question then is, what would you want me to use in deciding, whether your essay and your essay are the same or not? Should I use 1 shingle representation or k shingle representation?
Maybe sentence.
Higher, right? Because your life is in danger. And just because you use the same words, you should not be put in jail. Do you understand what I'm saying? And that's exactly what you really depend on. Basically, spam mails are the same way. So for example, if you got a spam mail, and you got 1 more spam mail, and you want to see if the previous one is already been marked spam, if this one is similar to this mail, it must be spam too. And you don't tend to do it using words, you think we should do it using shingles. But then IR, as I said, is adversarial. So the fact that you're thinking like this is also known to the guys who send the spam mail. So what do? Just like you do, when you copy your friend's essay, you will once in a while put an extra comma here, or put some extra word here, so that the k-shingle based method will fail. And you'll still, go ahead, right?
Synonyms.
What? Synonyms, for example. Yeah, all sorts of. Don't tell them. Enough stuff already. So my point is that essentially k-shingles will increase the precision, but sometimes they'll actually miss by, in an adversarial scenario, some irrelevant differences can make 2 documents not be similar. So it's a very interesting trade-off. I have no answer right now. All I'm trying to tell you is, if you're retrieving documents, you probably want to go with smaller k. If you're comparing 2 documents for identicality, duplicate detection, you want to do it with a higher k. But then if you're doing duplicate detection in an adversarial scenario, you don't want to make the k too big. Or you should not be stupid enough to tell the spam mailers, I normally do a 3 shingle based detection, so And then they will just make sure that every 3 words they'll put an extra comma. The Viagra, for example, apparently has humongous punctuation marks. Haven't you seen, most of you have not gotten enough of those mails. Maybe I'm only the guy who's getting Viagra. So Viagra is written in all sorts of interesting ways. What do you think? Why? To stop, you from comparing, exam-based approaches. To see, there may be There may be spam detectors which just look to see if the word Viagra exists. If so, remove it from the mail. And so you put a whole bunch of extra characters in it so that your shingle-based methods will fail. Okay? So anyway, so that's the kind of things that you can understand even before getting into the, the specific similarity metrics we are talking about. Okay? So then what else? For the user profile, how do you represent the user? I could do all sorts of things. For example, I can represent user by the set of queries they have asked in the past, by the set of books they have read in the past. And then after that, I can say, well, the books then are documents, so then the books can also be represented the same way the rest of the documents are represented. Okay? In general, there are again humongous several different ways you can represent the user, but if you were somehow thinking it would be based on some text describing the user, then that text can again be represented similar ways as these documents. Okay? I know that there are some hands I'll get back to it. Okay. Now, in each of these cases, the question is whether it is keywords or words or shingles. Now that a file is made of shingles, do you want to think of it as a set of shingles, or a bag of shingles, or a vector of shingles, or a distribution of shingles? You can do any of them without changing the basic representation. So you can pick one here and one here. That would be a representation. So I can have a file made up of words, and it's a vector of words. I can have a file made up of shingles, and it's a distribution over shingles. Distribution meaning probability distribution. How likely is it that a random file will have this shingle present in it? Okay? And similarly, I can have a file made up of keywords, and it could be a set of keywords. So again, these are orthogonal dimensions. You can pick one here, and you have a representation. Okay? So those are the parameters that you're playing with in representing this. Now, having come up with this, I need to tell you which one will be picked first. Okay? What we'll pick for most of today's discussion, and probably until I start saying we are making changes, the default discussion would assume that a file is made up, represented as all words. That means one shingles. So then we will consider words as sets of words, bags of words, vectors of words, and not today but maybe later, distribution over words. And then when we start talking about two shingles, then you can again do sets of two shingles, bags of two shingles, vectors of two shingles, and so on. Okay, that's what we'll do. And then since we're representing file as keywords, we'll also represent query as words, one words. So that means one shingles. Okay? And then what do we do for you? By default, we ignore the user. By default, we ignore the user for now. Okay? We know that obviously that's the wrong thing to do, right? But then on the other hand, this whole thing is the wrong thing to do. I said that the right thing to do is to learn. So we just, it's the same slippery slope. We're getting to a point where we can use some sort of a similarity metric. So we'll ignore the users by default, and this is actually a good thing because your release 1 will be bad, and then you can do a release 2 with the user thrown in, and that'll be a better search engine. And then the release 2 and the release 3, then the other question of course is what about these? By default, we'll ignore that. We'll ignore the rest of the documents. Okay? So the basic search engine represents files as collections of words, queries as collections of words, and then the main differences would be whether they think of them in terms of set semantics, bag semantics, vector semantics, distributions. By the way, how many people know the difference between sets and bags?
In the bag, you can have repeated elements.
Exactly. So a bag is like a bag. So if I buy 2 bananas and 3 eggplants in my bag, then my bag is different from your bag, which only has 1 banana and 1 eggplant. Okay? Whereas our sets are the same. You and I both have the same set. Eggplant and bananas are in our sets. Okay, that's the difference. Okay. We'll talk about vectors a little later. Basically, what we'll do is, in the case of vectors, we'll assume that apples and bananas are axes. Apple is the x-axis, banana is the y-axis. I went from apples. I was supposed to be talking about something else, I guess. But think of now apples and bananas. We lost eggplants now. So apples is x-axis, bananas is y-axis. And so then you would be, if you have 3 bananas and 2 apples, you essentially have 2, 3 is your point. That's a vector. And if you think of them as vectors, then you can get a slightly different intuitions as to how similar are two points. You, for example, might consider the distance between the points. It's a reasonable. If you think of them as sets, you have a different intuition as to whether two sets are equal or not. One is, of course, you consider their intersection and their union, right? And then you can actually take the ratio of them, in which case you have this idea called Jacquard similarity. And then these sorts of ideas can also be extended to bags. Jacquard similarity can also be extended to bags. There, I've said the whole entire class today. Okay, the rest of it is just giving a little more detail about these ideas. Okay. So the default model, we should assume that the document is represented in terms of words. I mean, keywords are words. And then we'll assume that their semantics are either sets or bags or vectors, and so we'll see the difference, for each of these semantics, what would be the right way to compute the similarity. We shall ignore the user initially. We shall also ignore the rest of the results initially. So no diversity, no user customization. Okay. And so then in which case relevance just becomes similarity between the document D and the query Q. And so that would mean that we need to understand how to compute similarity between sets, how to compute similarity between bags, how to compute similarity between vectors. And we come up with some reasonable ideas. There is nothing to learn anymore. It's just what would be a reasonable way of computing similarity between vectors. Okay, what would be a reasonable way of computing similarity between sets and so on. That's all we're going to focus on. And we'll ignore the residual relevance at least for now. But in fact, you could extend the same idea to handle the residual relevance, but we'll ignore that for now. Okay. What I mean by residual relevance essentially is if I'm taking the K results that I have shown to you till now, then having shown these documents, how much more relevant is D? Because the relevance of D could depend on whether this is an empty set or whether some K results have already been shown. Right? So that we will ignore for now. Okay. And as I said at the end of last class, we slipped down a slippery slope by now. We were trying to solve a noble problem, and we are now solving what we can solve. Okay, and you want to keep that in mind, because when you're trying to improve this, you should just go back to what you should have been doing to begin with. And remember that you're doing this one because there's light here. That's it. Not because this is necessarily the right thing to do. Okay? So where does the additional ideas come? They will come from what you should have been doing to begin with. Learning relevance functions is, for example, one. Okay, I'll skip over that with marginal relevance discussion. So now that I'm interested in similarity matrix, the question is, how do I define similarity matrix? Okay, sets, two sets. How do I define similarity between sets? How do I define similarity between bags? How do I define similarity between vectors? Because those are the three things I mentioned. Okay. Before I even go into some formulas, and of course, some of you probably heard of cosine theta similarity metric. Some of you just heard Jacquard similarity metric. And there is also Boolean test to see whether certain words are present in certain file or not. Before all of those, I want to ask ourselves, what should be a good similarity metric? What are the properties of a good similarity metric? What are we caring about? Okay, and here are some, and I want you to understand and sort of see if you agree with them. One is, I'm thinking that the partial matches should be allowed. If you have a long query, and some of the words are missing in the document, then you can't just say the document is not relevant. Suppose you have like 20 words and 19 of the words are present in this document. The 20th word, one of the 20 words is not present. You don't want to just throw this document out. Intuitively, it sort of makes sense, because after all, we know that the user doesn't quite know what they're looking for. They typed some number of words. Maybe they, just as when you are being imprecise about what you're looking for, you can either under-specify what you're looking for or over-specify what you're looking for. And if you over-specify what you're looking for, then you would have an extra word which unfortunately no document has, and so you won't get answers. Or you mistyped a word, and so you won't get any answers. So what you really want to do is be a little more flexible and allow documents to be returned even if they don't have all the words in it. So you want to support partial similarity. What that means is, ideas like Boolean matrix, which says yes, it's relevant, no, it's not relevant. Those are not as good. You want some sort of graded similarity. You say this is 100% relevant, this is 94% relevant, this is 89% relevant. How to come up with those numbers is a different issue. All I'm saying is, don't look for a similarity function whose only outputs are 1 and 0. Look for similarity functions whose outputs range between 0 and 1. That's all I'm saying. Does anybody have a problem with this? Yeah.
How do you do that?
I'm now telling you, I'm telling you first what we want before how to do it. Okay? I'm putting everything upside down and because that's the way I think you should do life, which is figure out what you want and then find how to get there. As against get somewhere there and say, hey, looks like that's where I want it to be. Which is what most of the time we do. Don't do that. Okay? So agree or disagree with me as to whether this is a reasonable desiderator, for an eventual similarity metric. Okay? That's one desiderator. The other is, now that I allowed one step and said not all words have to be present, then the question is, who are the loser words? Which words, when not present, should hurt you more, should hurt the document more than which other words? In other words, some words are more equal than other words. And if this does not confuse you, I don't know what else will. So all words in the query are not created equal. If some of them are missing in the document, you probably should care more about it than some others are missing. Notice this wouldn't have been an issue if you said everybody should be present. In which case, how does it matter who is more important? Did you understand what I'm saying? I mean, if when there is a fire, if all of us are going to be rescued, we don't need to know who is more important. If we know that 3 people are going to be rescued, we need to establish the importance measure that includes me and maybe 2 other good people. And then the rest will be lower. Right? So the point is, if everybody is being rescued, how does it matter? Right? So if every word is going to be present in the file, there is no importance for the words. It's when you are allowing partial matches that you need to know who should be, who should certainly be rescued. Rao should always be rescued because, important guy. Okay, so that's the question. So now, how do I figure out the word importance? Notice I did not even think this was going to be an issue, but now that I'm allowing partial matches, this becomes an issue. So here is the question. So if the query is red sponge, and a document that just has the word red should be seen to be less relevant than the document that just has the word sponge.
Sponge more relevant.
Because, would you agree with that approximately? Now, you should agree with it if we are searching the library of SpongeBob. Because presumably SpongeBob only has books about sponges. Red sponges, blue sponges, yellow sponges, sponges that can be used for various things. And in that case, the word red is more important than the word sponge. Do you just see what I just said? The 2 points I made. One is, first of all, by sort of looking at how common a word is with respect to the document collection, you can see whether or not it's an important word. If everybody has that word, then it's probably not important. If only few files have that word, then it is important. And the second corollary is that when we say something is important or not important, we are making a judgment with respect to a particular document collection that we have in mind. Okay? And now if you have a different collection, then this might change. So for SpongeBob's library, sponge is a very common word and red is less common. Okay, for your and my libraries, for the rest of the world's libraries, sponge is a less common word and red is a more common word. For your library, the word computer is a useless word because everything in your library hopefully has the word computer in it. But for the world at large, computer is a pretty good word. So if you are trying to establish importances for the words, then you need to consider the distribution of the words over the documents and how common is it. Why don't we have cows in the zoos?
Because they're
It's an
common.
animal, looks cute, has 4 legs, and if any of you saw the Far Side cartoon, there's this one cartoon where this cow, Vern, basically, one day thinks that I will go join the local zoo. And then the caption says, Vern didn't realize that as an animal, he's too common. That's it. There's nothing wrong with cows, it's just there are too many of them. Okay, whereas we have done a much better job with some of the other animals, so that there are only 3 or 4 left, and so we put them in the zoo. Right? Okay. So that's the important thing. So you need to consider the distribution of the words over the documents, and you kind of would agree with this. Exact formula I would use to compute this is almost irrelevant. You will see one already, but that's not the issue. You kind of see that once you went to the slippery slope of allowing documents that only have partial matches, then you need to see who are more important in the query, which words are more important than which other words. Okay. And then finally, this one, the relevance or similarity should not depend on the size of the document. Okay, the idea basically is, if I have, let's say, some reasonable similarity metric which says for Q1 is 0.7 similar to document D1 and 0.4 similar to document D2. Now, if all I do is take document D2 and make multiple copies of it and concatenate it to itself, now I have D2, 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 D2. I haven't changed a thing in the document, it's just become much bigger now. It better not be the case that the similarity changes. Would you agree? Right? I think it's true even for duplicated papers. If all you did with your friend's paper is your friend wrote a 1-page paper and you made 7 pages of it by concatenating the same thing and said, look, mine is different, mine is like 7 times bigger, I wouldn't agree, right? And it's even more so for queries. So you don't want, whatever the similarity metric you will eventually get, it should not depend on the length of the document. It should be somehow normalized with respect to the length of the document. Do you guys see that? That's sort of not an obvious thing, but it only makes sense because we assume that the meaning of the document does not change if you were to double by just copying the document once again. If you think the meaning changes by just having the entire document reproduced below it again, then we are in different words. And since whatever we are doing here is to find the meaning, all of this really is sort of a kind of a proxy for meaning. Right? And if similarity is supposedly capturing the meaning similarity between query and the document, it better not change just because you increase the size of the document by doubling it. Would you agree? Yes?
That may be true in the case of duplication, but naturally if the size of the document is far bigger than the size of the document, then...
No, remember what I said. Be very careful about, understand what I just said. I'm not talking about this issue. Suppose I have one document D1 which is 1000 kilobytes, another document D2 which has 2 kilobytes. I'm not somehow saying, without even looking at the document, that their similarity should be same. Are different. I don't care about that. That's what your similarity function is supposed to figure out. All I am saying is, if you were to say this is 0.4 similar originally for the query, now all I did is I took D2 and made a file where I put D2, 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 D2. It's a bigger file now. You don't want to, if your similarity matrix says now this is either not, as long as it says it's not equal to 0.4, I think there's something wrong with this similarity. It should increase, it should reduce. Now, of course, sometimes you might say, you're saying the same thing in such a long, winded way, I'll give you fewer marks. That might mean it's less relevant. But what we're saying is, ideally, if you're only talking about the meaning, then really it should change. And so, when you are looking at similarity metrics that I will be talking about in the next half hour, you should be looking at, do they have these properties? Are they Boolean? That means, do they only give 1, 0 as the answer, or do they give numbers between 1 and 0 as the answer? And are they allowing, if they're allowing partial matches, do they have a sense of which words are more important than which? And then finally, are they dependent on the size of the document? I'm not saying these are the only desiderata, but these are reasonable desiderata. You might come up with more, okay, but certainly these are reasonable desiderata that we can agree on. Okay, and so what we'll see is, not surprisingly, we'll like the ones that satisfy these and not like the ones that don't satisfy this. Okay, that's good. Okay, so this is your universe for this class and maybe part of next class. The models, we are thinking of words, so we, files and queries are represented as collections of words. Okay, and then so the question is, how do you represent that the collection? Is it a set, or a bag, or a vector, or a distribution? We'll at least talk about set, bag, and vector. Okay, and then the metrics, we'll look at Boolean metrics, we just give 1 and 0 as the answer, and then non-Boolean metrics. After later, Jaccard and vector are non-Boolean metrics. They give values between 0 and 1, all inclusive. Okay. Okay, so the other, actually, this is interesting thing. We'll see that Jaccard will only give rational numbers. We'll see that. Okay, so it's not all numbers between 0 and 1, because between 0 and 1, you have rational numbers and irrational numbers. You'll never get irrational numbers because Jaccard is just a fraction. We'll define it as a fraction over integers. And then finally, having do these, then we'll start doing adjustments for some of these similarity metrics. In particular, we start off like the vector model and vector, similarity, the cosine theta similarity. We'll look at that more longingly, and we'll adjust it. In fact, these adjustments can be done to any of them, but we also talk about adjustments that normalize the lengths. That's one thing. Normalize the length of the document so that the size effects will not be there. And we'll also look at word importance, compute the word importance using this idea called TF-IDF. Now it turns out adjustments here can be applied to any of them. So in some sense, this really is pick one here, pick one here, pick one or more here. Adjustments, all of them can be done. And you have an IR model. Okay, the specific one everybody likes in traditional IR is vector, normalized, TF-IDF. So that would be the end of this particular lecture. Okay, when we get to vector, normalized, TF-IDF, then you have sort of reached a local optimum. But then you want to know what are the problems with the other ones. Okay, and you kind of know this already, because if I don't do the adjustment for normalization, I would be losing a disintegrator. If I don't do the TF-IDF, I'd be losing the SpongeBob thing, where you would sort of think that sponge is just as important as red. When it's not. Okay, so that's what we're going to do. Questions? Okay, so the Boolean model. So if it's a Boolean model, basically the Boolean model sort of goes with the set representation. So I assume that the document and the query are sets of words. Okay, and then in fact the query can be seen as a propositional formula. It turns out it doesn't even have to be a conjunctive set of words. It can have or and so on. Okay, the document, however, is just a conjunctive set of words. Okay, and then what I would like to check is, given the document, which is a conjunction, is the query satisfied by the document? So if I give you a Boolean logic formula, all of you have done Boolean logic at one time in your life. If you've forgotten, go back and remember what it is. If I give you, a document, a query which says word 1 or if word 2 is there, then word 3 is there. That's my query. That's a Boolean formula, right? And then if I have a document, word 1, word 2, and nothing else, and another document, word 1, and then another document, word 1, word 2, word 3, word 4. These are all the documents. So tell me which documents satisfy the query. Remember, each document, this W1, W2 is just basically W1 and W. That's all. And this one is W1. And so, because these are documents, any word which is not present in the document, they are false. Think of each word as a proposition in the Boolean logic sense. If it's present, it's true. If it's not present, it's false. Okay, so in this, word 1 is true, everything else is false. In this, word 1 is true, word 2 is true, word 3 is true, word 4 is true. And here, only word 1 is true and word 2 is true. Okay, now, so these are basically, if you remember the Boolean logic truth tables, these are the words. And given a single word, it's trivial to evaluate the formula. Okay, and then, so in this particular case, if I evaluate this formula in this word, yeah, W1 is already present, okay, and so I don't care anymore. I'm done. Okay, in this case,
I'm curious about 1 and word 2.
what? Actually, what I would like to make it more interesting is W1 and W2 implies W3. That will be a more interesting query. So in this case, W1 is present, W2 is present, W3 is not present, so this document does not satisfy the query. Here W1 is present, W2 is not present, so this is satisfied. So this document satisfies the query. Okay, and then here W1 is present, W2 is present, but W3 is also present, so this document also satisfies that. This is the Boolean model. It's just application of Boolean logic. So you think of query as a Boolean logic formula. You think of a document as a word or an interpretation where each word is basically a proposition, and then you just evaluate the truth value of the formula in this word. If the formula becomes true, then the document is a match. If it becomes false, the document is not a match.
Just like that.
What?
Just like that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So the interesting question, of course, is you are asking pretty interesting, complicated queries. It's no longer, the query is not a file anymore in this model. Query is a Boolean logical formula. Documents are words, sets of words. Okay? And so this kind of a model is very good if you want to ask very complicated, precise queries that you know what you're looking for. And then some engine below you will look at that Boolean logical formula in the word and evaluate it to be true or false. Okay? Now, one thing actually, so that's basically what we want to talk about, what I want to say here. The other interesting thing is that, you may have remembered from some part of your Boolean logic, several times we introduced Boolean logic to you, that Boolean logical formulas have two canonical forms, CNF and DNF. CNF is essentially a collection of disjunctions, and so it's a conjunction over disjunctive clauses. That's CNF. Okay, you know that. Some of you have heard about this. And then there is another one called DNF. That's also a canonical form. And the whole point of the word canonical form means any Boolean logical formula can be converted either into a CNF form or into a DNF form. Okay, the DNF form would be disjunction of conjunctions. So it would be of this form: A and not B and not C, or A and D, or B and not C and not G, where all the letters are words. So if I were to take my complicated Boolean logical query and convert it into the DNF form, then basically I'll have, for example, so here is my query. Keyword A and either keyword B or not keyword C. Okay? Actually, for those of you who remember logic, and you should after this class, if you don't, you have to remember again, that actually, so I wrote KA and KB are not KC. So not KC or KB is nothing but KC implies KB. I mean, if you're surprised by this, you have been sleeping for a while in computer science, right? So A implies B is identically equal to not A or B. So implication sign is a syntactic sugar. You can live without it. Okay? And so basically this was a query. It says KA should be present. This is just like my original query. KA should be present and if KC were to be present, then KB must be present. That's what this query is saying. Okay, and so I can convert that essentially into a DNF form. And the DNF form will basically say KA, KB, KC is one world, and KA, KB, KA and KC, so this one, remember this one is written as KC implies KB. So either all three are true, or the first one and the last one are true, or just the first one is true. Either of the cases, the document is considered okay. So now I can take these masks and put on the document and see if the mask, any of the masks satisfied, then the query is satisfied. So if you don't remember how to evaluate a complicated Boolean formula on a given world, you convert into DNF and then you evaluate each disjunct, each conjunct. See if this conjunct is present, if this conjunct is present, if this conjunct is present. If any of them are present, you stop and say yes. When you come through all the conjuncts and none of them are present in the document, then you fail. Do you see what I'm saying? So this is how the Boolean version works.
So DNF is faster.
No, we only use DNF. We don't use CNF. I'm just saying CNF and DNF are the two canonical forms. In those, how many of you have, any of you have done 471, Introduction to AI? Okay, good, some more. But if you did that, you would have talked about CNF, because when you do theorem proving, you convert everything into CNF. Okay, it's a useful canonical form, but we don't care about that theorem. We care about the DNF form in this case. Why? Because it's easier to check whether an entire mask is present. Imagine that you're putting the mask on the file to see if all three are present or not. Okay. Okay, so that's the Boolean thing, and so this is basically saying the same point. Now, Boolean model is actually popular. Believe it or not, none of you have used it. Most search engines provide Boolean operatives. How many of you have used these Boolean operatives in asking queries to Google? Okay, are you a liar? Not yet, you should be, if you are using that. Because actually most people don't use. Most people don't do advanced search. There is an advanced search button, but nobody touches that. People just write whatever they feel like, and since Google is supposed to divine what we are interested in, it should do it. So we don't actually try to write a precise query. The maximum anybody has done is probably use plus sign. That means this word must be present. Okay, but actually most search engines allow basically Boolean search, Boolean operatives. Okay, so the reason in fact, the people who actually use it are lawyers, and this, for example, one law database. Remember, lawyers care about previous cases that seem to be relevant to the current case, so that they can take it to the judge and say, look, in that case, you ruled in a way that would be favorable to us if you were to do the same thing here. Right? That's what all of law is. And so they need to find the right cases. It's not enough that there is a case where you were favorable, so why can't you be favorable to us? You need to argue that it's the same as our case. Okay? And so they look for very specific queries. So for example, the information need here is information on the legal theories involved in preventing the disclosure of trade secrets by employees formerly employed by a competing company. Okay, so the query would be trade secret, and then the /s is supposed to be in the same sentence. So trade secret with it being present in the same sentence as disclosed, with some form of the disclosed, disclosure, etc. And in the same sentence, there should be prevent, and in the same sentence, there should be employee. Okay? That's the query. If you do that, then you sort of represented the representation. Here, other one is requirements for disabled people to be able to access a workplace. Here's another query. One more information in cases about a host responsibility for drunk guests. And here's another query. The point is, these look more like the SQL queries that people write, rather than like the keyword queries that people write. And what did we say about SQL queries? Nobody other than professional database people write them. So if you want normal people to be able to access your search engine, you don't expect them to be able to use these complicated queries. And if they were to use these complicated queries, they're more likely to make mistakes than actually use them correctly. Lawyers probably get training to use this, and so they try to use it correctly. Okay, so the Boolean model, there is nothing particularly bad about it. There is this problem, of course, that Boolean model is 1 or 0. That means is it relevant or not relevant? There is no in between. Get you? Okay. But the other problem is it allows. It can be a feature or a bug. It allows complicated queries. Feature. It allows complicated queries. Bug. Do you see what I'm saying? And so that's the reason why we start talking. We go to the other models. Yes, there's a question.
Some of the earlier search engines, weren't they based off of this? Because I remember putting in certain like keywords into, like, this was back in like early 2000s, like even before then. But you'd put like a word and then it'd have and or box, and you just list what you wanted.
Yeah.
Like,
So,
was that?
you're saying search engines allow this?
Yeah.
Like,
Well,
yeah.
search
So
engines
currently
only had
most
this.
search engines, what they do is they'll allow you to, so remember that if you don't do anything, what is that, suppose you don't use any of these special operatives, you just wrote a bunch of words, which is what most people do. What's the semantics of that? A Boolean query has to say, is it a conjunction or a disjunction? It can't be anything other than that, because you can't say the first two words we'll assume there is a disjunction, the second and the third word we'll assume there is an implication. It makes no sense whatsoever. Right? So you have to make either a universal conjunctive assumption or a universal disjunctive assumption. It turns out both are bad. Right? Universal conjunction means even a single word is missing, the file is not good enough for you. If universal disjunction means, hey, I have the word the, and so it should be an answer for you. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's again, I think it's a very good question. So what search engines do is at the top level, they assume keyword semantics, which means it's neither a disjunction nor a conjunction. In fact, you don't have a set. In fact, you don't have a Boolean query. You have a similarity-based query. And so I won't think of it as a disjunction or conjunction. I think of this as a collection of words, a mini document. And then I'll compare that mini document to the other document. And if they're both sets, then I'll do set similarity. If they're both bags, I'll do bag similarity. And if you know what you're doing, they'll allow you to add operators. Once you allow operators, then they assume you mean those operators. It's a very subtle thing. I didn't even bother writing it, but it's a very good question. If I remember, I'll try to add that. But they have to make an assumption up front. If you write just a bunch of words, is that a conjunction or a disjunction? It's neither, most of the time. Okay? That's the issue. Okay. So drawbacks, retrieval is based on the binary relation. So there is no notion of partial matching, no ranking of the document. Information it has to be translated into a Boolean expression, which most users find awkward. This is supposed to be a computer science senior and graduate level class, and I said Boolean logic. Most people looked at me as if, I was talking in some foreign language, right? And so imagine random people taken off from, Mill Avenue writing Boolean queries. Okay, that would be a great business plan to make money for search engines. Then Boolean queries formulated by the users are most often too simplistic because they don't know how to use it. Right? Remember, it's like when you went to Disneyland when you were a little kid, they will allow you to drive these cars that you can feel as good as your dad, that I am also driving a car. How many controls did they allow in that? How many gears were there in that car?
None.
Nothing. If you press something, it moves. If not, it just stops there. Why? I don't want to give you too many controls when you have no clue what you're doing. Okay? And then imagine having a car which basically, as long as I'm pressing, it goes at a constant speed of 3 miles per hour. And then when I remove my leg from the pedal, it just stops, which is exactly what happens in the Disneyland cars, right? And those are basically given because the users, which are kids, if you were to give them too many controls, they will actually create large number of accidents. We create 2, but at least we can get this suit, okay? So here again, what we're doing is we are removing, if we were to provide too much flexibility when the user population doesn't know how to use it, they can hang themselves well and good. And of course, unfortunately, if the users hang themselves well and good, you can't make money off of selling advertisements to them, which is search engine advertisement financial model. Okay, so that's the reasons why we move on from Boolean queries. And then we go to documents as sets or bags of words. And we'll talk about bags mostly because sets is just a special case of bags. Okay, so what is document as bag of words? Basically, I really assume that, here are all the words. here are all the documents, and then I'm just writing how many times the word system occurred in this document, how many times the word EBS occurred in this document, etc. If it is 0, that means it didn't occur at all. If it is 2, that means system occurred in this document 2 times. Okay? If I have to only look, if I'm looking only at keywords, then I'll probably consider the presence of